Okay, good morning. We're talking about culture design on the video today, shaping culture. As we discussed in the previous video on 3 V's, not only do you have that alignment with 3 V's, the vision, the values, and a visual representation of both of those, you have the means now to start thinking about how to shape the culture by developing and measuring behavioural competencies. And behavioural competencies, we'll talk in more detail under the videos about this, but it's just a collection of behaviours that you require to measure against something like culture.
Yeah, I guess it's just like a framework of the behaviours you're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So, a question to ask then, are you a leader managed by the culture? Are you a leader who's managed by the culture? Why I say that is, we're taking some of our reference from Edgar Schein, who's MIT professor, and we talked about him a bit in the 3V's video, and did a lot of work on culture. And one of the quotes that he has is, the bottom line for leaders is that if they do not become conscious of the culture in which they're embedded, these cultures will manage them. Bit of a mouthful, but are you a leader who's managed by the culture? Or are you a leader who's managing the culture? So that's something to think about as an individual, watching this video, or taking over an organization, or whatever it may be. Think about culture consciously. Is it the right one? And if it's not, what are you going to do about developing and changing that? So as a means to start looking at this in a visual way, on the screen you'll see an iceberg model. Iceberg models are great for lots of things, and it's a good metaphor. We can see what's above the surface, and we know 80% of the iceberg is beneath the surface. And in this case, we're talking about cultures. Cultures are deep-seated, pervasive and complex, and hence could be seen as not easy to change. Yeah, and maybe that's why sometimes cultures, we just float around in the culture that we arrive into. To be conscious about it and look to develop and change that takes a bit of effort and understanding some of these core concepts here. So we just walk through them. So the iceberg model, what it's showing us, and this is from, again, Edgar Schein, the artifacts, what sits on the surface of organizations. Any organization you walk into, there'll be symbols of the culture of the organization. Classic one is workwear. Big organizations may have some branded uniforms. And so, or process, visible things in a business which are not always clearly understood. Okay? Just because you're wearing a branded uniform, well, what does that mean? Is keep my personal clothes clean, or is it trying to portray a statement of some sort? So symbols, organization, and workwear processes, they're visible but not always clearly understood. This isn't really culture. It's part of it, but it's not what culture's about. And then beneath the surface now, this is the interesting pieces, the subtleties. Most organizations will have some conscious strategies, could be displayed, goals, philosophies, and conscious statements of what they want to happen. Again, not always visible, but can be. It can be in big posters, it can be in brochures, it can be in regular communications. And it's a way, it's called espoused values. These are values which are sort of given to an organization. And you'll see them in big orgs on the wall, come down from the hierarchy, espoused values. They're there, but you can see them, but not always visible, and people taking note of.
And do you think those can be the culture that the leadership or the organisation actually wants?
It could be, because it's conscious at this stage. Yeah. Somebody's made a conscious effort to bring in the strategy, the goals, or the philosophies, conscious statements, what they need to happen. And that tends to be the espoused values has come from somewhere else.
Yeah.
Okay? But if it has come from within, not necessarily has it been cascaded to the whole organisation. The organisation is not bought into it.
Yeah.
In some cases, not in all
Yeah.
cases, but it can be, yeah. And that's why sometimes they're not visible. There can be a chief executive, it can be a managing director, whoever has got these written down for their own personal benefits in a drawer somewhere. That's a really bad example. Or you've got somebody who's done this and they're displayed on a beautiful display. Here's the values we want in our organisation. Here's the culture that we're looking to live in our organisation. But it's not being communicated to verbally, one-on-one, on a regular basis to really build and shape that
So
culture.
it's very superficial at that level.
Potentially, yeah, potentially.
Yeah.
So you'll find that in most organisations. You find artifacts and you'll find espoused values. But the core essence of culture is what really sits right beneath the surface, all these underlying assumptions. And we call this the unconscious behavioural blueprint, and the key to understanding why things happen as they do. So if we get to understand this, then we'll know why this is happening and we're not getting the performance that we necessarily need. Okay, so a leader, cultural understanding is essential to leaders if they are to lead. That's what they need to be looking at. Understand the culture. Is it right? Does it fit? And if it does, fine. If not, how do we look to change that? And the place that we start to change that is this section called underlying assumptions. And then those espoused values can be ones which are cascaded and bought into, and yes, they fit into all the artifacts and all the symbols of the
I guess
organisation.
it's how you bring those espoused values to life on the day-to-day
Yeah, it's those
behaviours.
day-to-day conversations.
Absolutely, because I guess that's the culture, and sometimes you can observe certain cultures in certain organisations very quickly, particularly if you're not sort of within it.
Yeah.
So if you
As
come in
an
from the
outsider, you
outside,
can.
yeah,
Yeah.
because you can. Now you mentioned the artifacts, you can see the smart workwear and a bit of the identity and see the values on the wall, but is that what you're actually seeing day to day in the workplace?
Yeah. Absolutely. So again, these underlying assumptions, we're going to link it now to 3Vs. We had a video on this last time round, and you'll see the infographic sitting on the screen there. So Trevor, just talk us through 3Vs.
Yeah, just a reminder again, you might have seen the previous videos, as Lindsay mentioned, but really 3Vs, it's the 3Vs, it's really vision, as we've mentioned before. We've called it the North Star, so it's like your guiding light. So that vision, it's about developing your vision and your line of sight for the organisation. But where's the organisation going? The values, you've mentioned it there, Lindsay. It's about identifying the core values and expected behaviours. So it's that stuff that's sitting at the bottom of the iceberg, under the water. What's those values? What's the behaviours? We spoke previously about what are values. We've mentioned that. It's very difficult to measure values. But if you can align, if you look back to, you mentioned at the start, that framework, that behavioural competencies, the framework, you can then start aligning the behaviours you want in terms of the culture that you're looking to develop. And then you can actually start measuring that. So identifying core values and those behaviours. And the third V is the visual representation. So it's the visual. So how do you then take the vision, take the values, and then cascade that? And not just cascade it, but actually the point of communicating it is trying to get buy-in from the people.
Of course it is.
So they're demonstrating those behaviours on a day-to-day basis. So it's not just the workwear, it's not just the posters on the wall, it's actually behaviours day-to-day.
The behaviours that you want.
The behaviours you want, in
the organisation.
Yeah.
Okay, so nice little link there. So look at those underlying assumptions, really, get the 3Vs in place, and that will certainly help to bring out and shape the culture you're looking for and grow that. Okay. The next little section we look at is when we think about culture and we think about organisational progress and performance and results. And it's trying to link these things together. So again, on the screen you'll see a visual, And in that visual, what we're saying is we've got this yin-yang symbol, and yin-yang is a sign of balance. So we're looking to have some things in balance. And we took this from Jim Collins' Good to Great. I think anybody who's into management and leadership, it's a great book to read if you haven't done so already. And just page after page of some wonderful advice, nuggets, and information you can use. And this one really excited me. It's the preserve core and stimulate progress. And preserve the core. The core has to be centered around your vision and your values. Now for us, that's the 3 V's. So, preserve the core, preserve your 3 V's. So you need to have one to start with. And it starts to give you a chance to shape your culture as well. But you've got to communicate that on a regular basis and make sure people understand that.
And when we say preserve the core, I guess it's preserve the core if it's the one you want. So
Yes.
it's developing that core,
Yeah.
which is the cultural element of it. Because I guess as we've looked at this and thinking, what culture do we want to develop? And if it's not the one you've currently got, so it's transitional from what you've currently got, if it's not what you want, to getting that core that's going to work for you.
So it's the 3 V's, yeah. And you're absolutely right there. If the culture isn't working, then the leader has the responsibility to change that culture. And to do that, you need a fresh set of 3 V's. Okay. So you need a new vision, because the old one's obviously not serving you well. It's taking you in a different direction. You want to go here, and the vision's taking you over here. So the set of values and beliefs and attitudes and behaviours is aligned with that. You're going in the wrong direction. We need a new North Star now.
Absolutely.
Move towards the new 3 V's. And that's what you're looking to preserve now, the new 3 V's. Yeah. So preserve the core, and that will enable you to start thinking about how you can stimulate some progress. Organizations, we've seen it, we've experienced that, trying to stimulate lots of progress within a culture which is not really going to embrace that change. And you're going to have problems. There's going to be some clash, some friction now. So preserve the core, and the link between the 3 V's, preserving the core, and getting to stimulate the progress is the culture. It's the thing that bridges the gap. So 3 V's just gives you the means to start thinking about what the culture can look like, how you can communicate it, how you can look to start measuring it somehow. And that culture then, that's the one that you want, that's what's moving towards your North Star and the business that you want. Then you can start to think about how you can stimulate progress. And that's your strategic priorities and your action plans, all those great business tools that I'm sure you've all got a handle on. But yeah, 3 V's, preserve that core, build your culture, and then start thinking about stimulating progress in the organisation.
And the diagram there, the yin yang, obviously you mentioned it's about balance. It's from Chinese philosophy, and really yin yang is balance, and it's no different in business. How if you think of the vision, the values, that North Star should be quite fixed, certainly for a period of time. But if it's not serving you well, then you would look to change that. But certainly think of that as the fixed elements. And then your strategic planning, your action plans, that's more flexible. Yeah. So in terms of the yin yang metaphor, it's the fixed elements, but also the flexible elements, because things do change, the environment changes, things just change in business. So don't be too fixed with the strategic element in terms of the action planning, etc. But your guiding light is your North Star, which should be fixed for a period of time.
It is, and the other thing that we put in here as well is you'll hear us every now and then talk about traits, behavioural traits, gentle traits, dynamic traits, and you could argue the vision, the values is
absolutely
all the gentle traits, and all of the stimulate progress is where you're getting into dynamic elements of the business. So there's the preserve core, stimulate progress. Took that straight out of Good to Great, and a little modification around that using some of our terminology. And just to bring in the Edgar Schein again, so an organisational culture consists of values, its beliefs, its attitudes, and behaviours that employees share and use on a daily basis in their work. So there's a lot going on there. As Trevor said before, you can get a sense of a culture when you walk into an organisation, because what I've just said there, what employees share and use on a daily basis, you'll hear them talk in a particular way. You'll hear them talk about a particular way about the organisation, and usually about their supervisors, their managers, their leaders, what's happening in the business, good, bad, indifferent, but you start to get a feel for what the culture's like in that organisation.
Because it can sometimes as well be the perception. But I guess if that's the perception people have got, then it's real to them. So that ultimately
That's right,
is the culture. Because you mentioned it's the conversations, it's the day-to-day conversations around the water cooler, or in the tea point, on the factory floor, or in the office. That is the culture, I guess. It's just the behaviours.
It's the perception of the
It's
culture.
the perception of the culture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so as we said before, these cultures are deep-seated, pervasive, and they're complex. And that's why we might want to steer away from it sometimes, but it can be changed. Okay, there's a way to do that. You've got to think logically about it. And just like any process that we look to change in an organisation, culture can be changed through a sequence of events as well, and good communication. Okay, so a bit of advice around what we've just been talking about. We have to say that 3 V's, we think it's a nice little term to use. 3 V's got to be your core. It's your vision, it's your values, and a great way to communicate anything with a picture. If you can represent that visually, then a bigger audience is going to get some emotional connection to that.
It's just easier to communicate it as well when you've actually got a good visual. It's much easier.
And it's really asking ourselves, well, why is 3 V's really important in the organisation? What does it bring?
It's the ultimate purpose of the organisation, isn't it? Over that period of time, that's what you're striving to achieve. So it's just where you're going. Obviously, the value is about how you're going to possibly get there through some of those behaviours. But it's tough. Yeah, changing culture can be really tough.
I sense it's sort of creating a new identity as well.
Absolutely.
As an organisation.
And it's, take you back to the thing you said at the very start, Lindsay, about, are you a leader managed by the culture? Often you see in organisations where there's a particular culture in place, and it's possibly one that's evolved because of the leadership. So there's a great phrase here, you get what you tolerate. But then the leader decides that's not the culture that's serving them well, and they want to change that culture. And sometimes the leader, it has to start with that leadership.
It has to start with leadership.
So they need to start doing things that's actually going to change that culture, because it's probably the culture that they've actually developed in one place.
In some cases, it's inherited as well. There is a way to do this. Then we'll give me some advice on how to do that in this video. And also, culture, we say that's a means to bridge the gap between the core of the business and stimulating progress. I think doing it the other way around, trying to stimulate progress and looking to change culture that way, I think is much tougher. It creates a lot of friction, and we get into change curve.
I was just going to mention, you've obviously got you may be familiar with the change curve. We've got a nice infographic there where you can see how change affects people in different ways. So there will be a journey, and culture's not just going to change overnight. It needs to be well thought out, and you need to be conscious of that people will react to that change in a different way. So it's important, and obviously the culture that you've currently got will dictate how those people react during that change as well.
Yeah, of course. So we're not going to major on that today, but you can see the infographic and search on further links on the change curve. Okay, so just to finish off 3 points. We want you to be a leader who shapes culture. And again, we'll go back to the Edgar Schein quote, because a lot of great work done there. It's worthwhile referencing it. Cultural understanding is essential if leaders are to lead. Okay, so are you a leader who's managed by the culture, or are you going to be a leader who shapes the culture? Second thing is, have your 3 V's, have your core set. Know what it is. If it's not the one you want, get it changed. It's 3 V's, it's vision, it's values, visually represent that and communicate the hell out of it. Let people hear it time and time and time again. Make it your core of your business.
Do what you need to get people to buy into it, because if they're not bought into it, it doesn't mean much.
Yeah. And a lot of that's through communication.
Yeah.
And you can use that 3 V's, the vision and values, to measure your culture. Now, we've got a particular way we like to do that. That's a subject for another video. But today, some recommendations could be through your performance management and appraisal. You can start thinking about, well, what behaviors do I want to see? And am I seeing them? 360 degree, it's very popular. You can ask peers, you can ask superiors and customers and clients for information around behaviors.
And just to point on that, I think 360s fit in some cultures perhaps more than others.
Yeah.
It can be quite destructive at times, but it can be a really useful tool.
Yeah. Or anonymous surveys.
Yeah.
Start asking a few questions around, have you seen these
There's
behaviors?
loads of different surveys.
Of course.
Employee engagement surveys. There's a lot of different tools out there that you can use.
And observations, we mentioned that. We have the pleasure of working with lots of organisations, and as you walk into an organisation for the first time, you get a sense of what that culture is. Okay, so observations, I think, are good as well. Maybe it's a bit more difficult if you're swimming in the culture now, but maybe there's consultants going in there, or a new chief executive coming in, or somebody new coming to the organisation. Listen to them. What are they telling you about the culture?
You can ask people questions as well. You can find out a lot of attitudes, perceptions, what people actually feel on a day-to-day basis. So asking good questions, you can find out a lot from an organisation's culture.
And the final thing there as well is results. If you're not getting the results that you need from the teams in your organisation, well, there's reasons for that. And it's not just one reason, there are reasons, and multiple, it's multifaceted. But a lot of times there is questions around, are we heading in the right direction? Are we telling people where we're going? Have we got the line of sight? Have we got the 3 V's? And have we the right culture for the performance that we're looking for? So results might be that trailing KPI that says we're 10% down on sales. We tend to be 10% down sales every year. Yeah. What is the problem? Okay, how can we get 10% up on sales every year? The culture needs to change. If the culture needs to change, we're back into 3 V's. Okay, what's the vision, the values, North Star, where we're going, and get everybody moving towards that. So 3 things in there. Be a leader who shapes culture, have your 3 V's, have your core, and then look to measure on those 3 V's and look to measure your culture.
Yeah.
Any final points?
Just on the last point you mentioned, the measuring. Yeah, there's another good saying: what gets measured gets done. And often people associate that with process and productivity, output, etc. But people, it's exactly the same. We need to understand how to measure, objectively measure. And there's things like you've said, which is the observations, etc. That'll give you a good feel. But yeah, you need to think of measuring behaviours the same as you do the process.
And obviously, if you're watching these videos, the common thing that comes out every time, we're talking about people.
Yeah.
Okay. Our vision is to unleash people's potential. Every video will be coming back to people all the time. People and talent in your business, and they help you grow your business as well. Okay. Well, thank you for listening today.
Thank you.
Thank you.